Useless Monster by Mute Crows, Chapter 22, or Chapter 21. Midoriya left his bag. Izawa stared at the bag in his hands, unsure of what to do with the proof of the matter that he held.
This was under my podium.
He looked up from it to the mop of air in front of him. Dark and wild bedhead girls frayed in every direction blocked most of their eyes, but he knew they were looking at him.
After school, before dark, Ellie found it.
Their voice carried with it a soft white noise, the kind people would pay money to have at their fingertips just for a good night's sleep. At the name, a muffled chirp came from their hood.
Thank you, Clem. I hope your cleaning went well and that you get some rest.
He got some sort of joked response along with a dismissive wave, and they were gone before he even got the chance to turn around. Izawa carried the bag with him towards his class. He would have to beat his students there to put it back where it had been. It had to have been put there because he was coming back. He worried. Izuku shifted back about a 40-minute walk from UA. He made it to the front gates in about an hour and a half. When he walked into the building, he realized he had forgotten where he even left his bento. He hadn't even thought to try and stop to grab it. He wouldn't be able to go and look for it either. It was a definite loss since he was supposed to be going with Izawa after the school day was over. He also didn't account for how incredibly haggard he now looked. His uniform was wrinkled horribly, and he could practically see his own exhaustion radiating off of himself. The exhaustion was pleasant in a way, though. Reliable. The loving burn of muscles stretched well enough to leave that aching warmth. A warmth that overrode any lingering ghosts of hurt, pain, worn to the final thread quirks everywhere and in so many people in so many directions. A soft reset written the gentle script of countless microtraumas of the flesh. Grounding. He walked into the classroom proper with 3 minutes to spare. He didn't grab his bag though. Izawa was already standing at the podium and he didn't want to grab it in front of him. The guilt that overcame him was unexpected when he saw the ever so minimal sag of relief in his bandaged shoulders. He always came back for his bag. It was the one thing he had yet to lose in all these years. The replacement was not losing it. He still had all his things from it. It was just wear and tear. He had thought its presence would be understood as a reassurance, not a farewell note. He didn't even get to cross the room before Ida started to lecture him in a way that some may have possibly described as fun, but Izuku was too worn down to fully register. The somehow loudly quiet words on the importance of getting proper rest and practicing proper self-care swarmed around him and reminded him that this was different. This year was truly different. He may have cried if it had been any other time, but he looked to Uraraka and caught the end of a sympathetic look. The eyes of someone else who had also worked long nights, or at the very least been incredibly close to the ones barely scraping by. Its rapid replacement with her usual bubbly energy was telling. It was a contagious energy, and she knew it. She knew it well enough to utilize it as the weapon it was at the best of times, and the comfort it provided at the worst. Tsuyu's unabashedly concerned gaze was heavy, even more so than the curious looks from other classmates. He could only shrug as a response. There wasn't anything he could have done for this long of a shift anyways. He was just along for the ride when his grip was taken from him. An especially cruel test of patience, in his opinion. He could hear some voices asking after him and his rough appearance. Their words barely glanced along the surface of his mind as he met Bakugo's eyes. He didn't know what to call what he saw there. Consideration felt too passive, and scrutiny was more than Bakugo had deigned to give him for years now. He fought the urge to look away and let it happen. He didn't have the energy to fight him today, nor did he have the energy to run anymore. That had been part of the whole point for the long sprint in the first place.
Why did you even bother coming in today, Deku?
The sneer in his voice made Izuku's skin crawl.
Why did you?
Izuku repeated back, calm, just loud enough to be heard across the room. The room's tension shifted slightly at that, the volume of other voices dropping to near nothing. He could probably count on one hand the number of times he had talked back at Bakugo in the last 8 years, and from the way Bakugo's glare sharpened, he recognized as much as well.
You've gotten rather cocky for a scrap of char, so obviously below even its own sad bar.
Bakugo's grip on the back of his seat tightened slightly. Izuku tensed just enough to match it.
Bakugo.
Izawa's voice cut in and the class fell into rapt silence.
The bell rang to start the day.
Wait outside the classroom.
He finished once the bell stopped. Bakugo got up in a huff and walked crisply out of the room.
Izuku was almost madly amused by Bakugo's words. There was no physical way for Bakugo to even come close to understanding him. It was a simple fact. He could have gone through the same homelessness and still not understand the fear Izuku had been living in for nearly his whole life. He was trying very hard to not sway on his feet. He wasn't confident it was just from the exhaustion this time, though.
Midoriya, go to Recovery Girl's office. I will be there when homeroom is over.
Izuku didn't even need to look around to notice the vague discomfort that had settled over the class. Izawa watched him until he sighed and turned to leave the room without saying a word. He watched Bakugo carefully as he walked past him, but he wasn't even afforded the barest of glances. It was almost frustrating the way he was getting near babied by the staff here at UA when no other school had even attempted any assistance. He could make it through the day. He could take his notes. He was fine. He was just tired.
The door had been closed for maybe 3 seconds before 5 different hands shut up.
He closed his eyes and took a breath.
You have 30 seconds.
He said, eyes open just enough to use his quirk if it got too rowdy, and a few questions went off immediately.
Is Midoriya still injured? Is his family not helping? Is there something we're going to be able to do?
Why isn't he being excused from the class until he's recovered?
Will at least he'll be at the festival if he isn't back to his normal health beforehand?
Will he lose his spot in the hero course?
Izawa let the questions roll over him, not a reaction to be seen. He couldn't even let a shadow of the somber internal setting he had been shown in response to what he heard. All of which just confirmed that even though his fellow classmates did care for Midoriya, the boy hadn't revealed a lick of information about his personal life to any of them.
Midoriya will not be dropped from the course simply because of recovery from an injury. He will be getting a check-over from Recovery Girl once he gets there. The rest is not information for me to divulge to you, and regardless, there are other things that require your attention for the time being.
The ones who would actually ask questions seemed generally put out by the dodge, but sat at attention nonetheless.
Just because the sports festival is in a few days does not mean your academics will be allowed to fall to the sidelines. You will all need to consider how to best use your time to maximize your study, exercise, social, and rest periods. Self-care is important even to the strongest of heroes. I can give clearance to different fields for quirk exercises as long as you check with me or have another staff member notify me so that I may approve the use in time. Use the rest of this homeroom appropriately.
He leaned down and grabbed Midoriya's bag as well as his sleeping bag, wrapping the book bag in it so that the students would not see that it had been left there. The fold of fabric over his arm looked no different to the outside viewer as he stepped out of the room to the sound of a study group tentatively being formed and a sparring suggestion getting tossed out for any takers. As he shut the door behind himself, he turned to look at Bakugo. Silent fury stormed the air around him into dense reactionary energy. A trained police dog waiting with unchecked anxieties. A nervous flutter waiting to prove, yes, I can do what will make the bad guy lose. Yes, I recognize the bad guy. Just let me out. I won't get it wrong this time. It felt cruel to liken a student to such an abused thing, but police dogs were put out of commission by law for a reason. Once a dog was trained to that level of constant hypervigilance, they could never calm down enough to go to a home, and it eventually became their doom.
Bakugo, any particular reason for stirring up unnecessary infighting in my class?
Izawa watched him carefully.
I thought competitiveness was encouraged within hero classes, sensei.
Bakugo continued to stare out the windows across the hall.
It is. Belittling classmates who are clearly still recovering from villain-involved combat is not competitive spirit, though. That is what I can only assume was a continued one-man war front against a fellow student.
He noted the way Bakugo's hands twitched slightly where they were hooked into his pockets.
This is not the first time you have targeted Midoriya on the school's property. UA is an institution that raises and bolsters heroes, inventors, and general academic minds alike. A rivalry is all well and good, healthy even, in the proper settings.
Then what is the problem exactly? Bakugo finally looked at him, searching. He was looking for a loophole most likely, a direction most definitely, and an out from the conversation in the end of it all.
You will be having 2 sessions with Hound Dog a week starting Monday. If they go well, we can discuss further steps under Hound Dog's discretion.
He needed to know the best way to correct these behaviors first and foremost. Hound Dog had a degree for a reason. What? Izawa raised their brow at the spark that Bakugo barely released.
That, or I will have you fully removed from my class. It would not be my first expulsion, Bakugo.
He didn't mention the extent of what his expulsions usually turned out to be, but that was the whole point now, wasn't it?
Was that clear enough?
Yes, Sensei.
Good. Return to your seat. I will have Hound Dog contact you during lunch.
Izawa left at a rushed pace. He fished out his phone and pulled up the near regrettably active chat and groaned at the newest name Yamada had set for it.
Monster Dads!
Yamada, yeah, we have the room ready! Well, it's just per essentials because of us going shopping together so he can get what he wants. Yagi-san.
He won't exactly be the most willing to shop. It took a long while just to get him to not grab the cheapest backpack there was when I took him to get a new one.
Yamada, you bought him his bag? Man, the last one must have been in rough shape considering how filled out and battered just his notebooks are. Izawa.
Midoriya is in RG's office. On my way there, so don't all come rushing in. We'll keep you posted.
He put it back, not even attempting to bother with trying to keep up with the ensuing onslaught of notifications that had his phone buzzing in its pocket. He paused just briefly outside her door so that he could unwrap the backpack and hold it more easily in his hand. His muscles protested from their general lack of use they had been getting, but he wasn't going to carry it long. When he opened the door, he found Midoriya curled on his side facing the windows, the blanket of the cot only covering his feet as the rest was tucked under his legs. He couldn't tell if he was dozing or simply had his eyes closed, even when he stepped closer. He set the bag carefully on the bed, just in the curve of Midoriya's tucked-up legs and folded arms.
So, is he alright?
Izawa turned to where Recovery Girl was doing work at her desk. She huffed, finished what she was writing down, and turned her seat to face him.
He's tired. He said he didn't sleep last night, but didn't tell me the reason why. Add to that the fact that he's still recovering from a rather massive amount of healing in a very brief period of time, his generally lacking diet, and that he is still technically a growing teen on top of it all. He's just exhausted. Sleep deprivation is not healthy at the best of times, but he has a very poor ground to stand on when adding it to his plate. From the way he is laying and that he didn't hesitate to take the cot, I would hazard the guess that he did a lot of traveling over the night as well.
She said it simply, a statement of observations without judgment. And yet, I'm sorry. They both look over and see Midoriya with an eye cracked open, his arms now folded around his bag protectively. What he specifically was sorry for, Izawa wasn't sure, but he had the feeling it was probably the only thing the kid could think to say at the moment anyways. He waved it off.
Just get some rest, Midoriya. I will write a pass for the classes you missed before lunch. If you sleep through lunch, I will personally walk you to whichever class it is after that you rest until.
Izawa walked over and dutifully plopped himself into the seat near the door, a guard to make sure he gets even a little bit of rest. Recovery Girl had already returned to whatever work she had been doing before he had gotten there. He watched the sliver of green he could still see eventually turn away and close. Good enough. Even if Midoriya didn't actually sleep, just resting the eyes truly could go a long way. The fabric of the bandages on his face rubbed just slightly wrong, and he frowned as he brushed a finger across the surface to try and figure out what the rub was from. He was beyond ready to take them off, but doctor's orders and all. He learned a long while ago that rushing healing was a recipe for disaster later. He was almost done with his round of meds for it all, and he just didn't like being below his best standard.
They can come off on Sunday.
She didn't even turn around as she spoke, just hit a few keys on her keyboard and wrote another thing down. He opened his mouth just slightly, and she cut him off before he even made a sound.
The cast will have to stay until after the festival.
Figures. He settled back in his seat, only closing his eyes after he watched Midoriya's breathing actually even off, muscles relaxing just so. They both could use some shutta, in his opinion. Rest helped boost healing, after all.